Hello, everyone. We are group number 3. These are my colleagues. Wei is going to talk about our topic, which is ethics and autonomous robots. So he'll be introducing the topic. Chelsea then is going to talk about robots as the receptors of ethical treatment from humans. I'll be talking about robots as ethical producers of towards humans. And then Michael will wrap up talking about can we actually build ethics into robots. So I'll turn the mic over to Wei.
Well, first of all, I will talk about introduce some general things about the ethics of autonomous robots. And robot is a multifunctional manipulator that's being utilized by human beings, mostly in manufacturing companies. And but with the rising intelligence of robots, and a consideration about the ethic issue has been the ethical issues has been arose controversially among the forward thinkers. And the ethics of autonomous robots is actually a part of ethics technology, but different from other technologies. It has two perspectives. The first one is the conservative view that the robots are considered as the tools. And the second one is from the radical view that robots not merely tools, but also have their intrinsic status and philosophically living on this planet like human beings. So from the conservative view, robots are at the same as other technology. The ethics is determined by those programmer and designers, whoever create those robots. And the ethics issue here is about the way how people use and create them, such as personal robots. It might be difficult for us to think about our own personal robots, but we can think about the Google. It is actually not a robot, but it is a personal artificial intelligence, because it will create a tool for us and based on our personal preference, and it will guess our needs. So someone can use the Google ethically, but some others can use it unethically. So no matter how we use it, the ethical issue is determined by the users rather than Google itself, because Google is innocent. And the other perspective is a radical view that the ethics of the robots is determined by their intrinsic value. And the ethics of the robots here it means the protection of their own rights and making their own moral decisions, because here the robots are considered as a person who have mind, and they have their own self-awareness. It probably will feel this is far from our daily life, but with the witness of the Deep Blue beat the chess champion Gary Kasparov in 1997. It has demonstrated that the relationship between machine and human has stepped into another level, that intelligence-wise, robots they have achieved the ability to outthink a person. And next one, Chelsea, we're talking about that.
We'll go ahead and switch it over. The topic that I pretty much covered, as Todd introduced, was robots and how humans will treat robots once we introduce them into society. It comes down to pretty much the responsibility and irresponsibility of our treatment of robots. It's notorious. It's going to happen at some point in the future when we're not quite sure, but it is something that is in the works and people are creating at this time. So before that happens, it really comes down to us as a society to determine how we're going to treat robots once they come into our culture. It all pretty much started with the word robot, and its original meaning is servitude. That is one of the things that I think humans are a little bit more adamant to thinking. When we think robots, we think of the Hollywood movie The Jetsons and different TV shows, and that robots are supposed to serve us. But in actuality, is that what we intend them to do? Robots someday will be programmed to do specific tasks for us, but they will also have the same intelligence level as humans. So that brings you down to robot servitude, which is building of non-human machines that desire to do tasks that humans don't want to do. There are 3 different viewpoints that have been identified at this point of how humans will view robots, and which one of the 3 is what we need to decide how we're going to view them. The first one basically says that robots are not ethical subjects, and therefore we can make them do anything for us. So no matter how smart they are, even if they're smarter than we are, they're basically just the same as washing machines, as an example. Number 2 is that someday robots will have ethical significance, such as humans, so it'd be unfair for us to treat them as tools. If we did do that, it's basically going to become the new slavery, using robots to do what we want them to do. Although they have an emotional connection, they can think for themselves. And the third one is basically a mix of number 1 and number 2. It's that robots will never have ethical significance, but we still must treat them like they do for the sanity of human sake, for our population. Basically what that is saying is there are going to be times when robots are going to look very humanesque. For our minds to be able to process that, we still must treat them as humans, and vice versa. That brings us up to the 4 ethical arguments of humans and robots. And the first one is, the debate is, do we program machines to do work that we don't want to do? Is that moral? Some suggest in the scientific world that programming robots is no different than nature programming a dog. A dog is programmed to fetch. That's what nature has it doing. No matter how smart the dog can be, it will still enjoy fetching, which is basically the argument for robots. They're going to be programmed to do what they like to do. Leave it at that. Other people are saying, or other scientists, that it's unethical to wire anything to do something we ourselves don't want to do. The next one is probability of human programmers embedding their own ethics. At some point, we're going to have programmers who are going to be unethical, and they're going to program their own ethics into robots. The second part is, once they come into the workforce, to what capacity? If we bring them in to do our work, humans will no longer have work, which brings us down to number 4. Human desensitization is that humans just at some point will not care anymore, and we'll have robots doing everything for us. And at this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Chelsea. So one of the questions that you might all have is, why would this even be a consideration? And what we're looking at is we're approaching what they call a singularity point in the future. Our technology is increasing exponentially, and we're looking at robots becoming self-aware at some point in our future. So this is bringing up this question of, how do we treat them ethically? How potentially do they treat us ethically? If you read some of Ray Kurzweil's books, particularly Spiritual Machines, he talks about this issue. Now, in his point of view, robots and humans are eventually going to merge together. And he thinks this will happen naturally. In his point of view, it will happen evolutionarily. But I think that one of the questions that we have is, until we reach that point, if we ever do, of actually merging with our robots, how do we maintain control over robots, especially robots that are self-aware? They may not have the same ideas that we have. They may have ideas that they want to do something different. Part of the argument here that Kurzweil is presenting is that humans are basically machines. Humans have ethics. Therefore, robots, being machines, will have ethics. But one of the questions that comes up is the question of emotions. Can you have ethics if you do not have emotions? Now, there are 4 schools of thought related to robots and ethics. The first part is anthropocentric. This point of view is basically very human-centered. This perspective is that robots are tools. Robots lack consciousness. Therefore, the most important part for robots to behave ethically towards humans is for our own benefit. Robots need to behave ethically because they need to treat humans correctly, and they need to treat humans well. A different perspective is infocentric, and infocentric is based on the idea that intelligence is based on patterns, whether biological or computational. Robot ethics should be a separate and equal ethical to humans. And there's an uncritical bias towards technology in an infocentric point of view. Basically, this is the thought that robots are equal with us, all technology is good. And that raises a question of the potential for a cold replacement of human civilization. One of the quotes that I read was basically saying, is it really a good idea if some kind of heartless, emotionless uber mind replaces human civilization? Is that what we really want? The third school of thought is biocentric. Biocentric is sort of the opposite of infocentric. This is basically saying that in order to have sentience, in order to have ethics, you need to be alive. Biocentric doesn't kind of expands the idea of anthropocentrism out to all animals. Basically, it's saying living animals can have ethics. Ethical behavior requires emotion and empathy. A biocentric person would say that in order to have ethics, you need to react to, not just reason about a situation. Another way of putting it is to say, in order to understand the golden rule, you need to actually be able to feel pain, to feel anger, and all of those emotions. The last school of thought is ecocentric. Ecocentric is concerned with the environmental degradation. There are basically three levels of ecocentric. Light green is concerned about the ecology in terms of how it impacts humans, so it's much like anthropocentric. Middle green is about all living things. Dark green is about the Earth itself. A dark green ecocentric would basically say our concern is about the planet Earth. Who cares what happens to humans? Who cares what happens to animals? And an ecocentric person would say, in terms of ethics, the Earth overrides everything, and so we don't want to be concerned with robots because it's part of technology, and technology is bad. So I'm going to turn it back over to Michael, and he'll talk about whether we can build in ethics.
All right, hello everybody. Basically, I'm like Todd just said, I will be talking about how we'll go about implementing ethics into these agents. And there are two types that I'm going to discuss. The first one is implicit ethical agents. Basically, you guys probably all recognize the robot that's on there. It's called a Roomba. It's meant to vacuum the floor. Basically, it goes around, it'll bounce off something, change direction, and go back until the entire floor is vacuumed. This is basically a primitive implicit ethical agent. The idea of this is to perform tasks without getting in the way of humans, without being intrusive, and this is not necessarily the scope of our topic, but it is a basic ethical agent. Like I said, these will basically just be used for service, sweeping, vacuuming, stuff like that. The next one is called the explicit ethical agent. Let me just kind of lay out a situation for you. Say you're driving a bus full of people, and this bus is going out of control. There's no way to stop it. You have two options by running into walls, but in front of each wall, one has a small child. The other wall has 5 grown adults. Which one are you going to run into if those are your only options? Could any of you make that decision that quickly? Okay, I couldn't either. This is what we will be asking explicit ethical agents to do. We'll be asking them to make quick decisions like that, and basically they will weigh the outcomes either way. I don't know the correct answer to that situation, but hopefully with programming they will come out with the least harmful to society. And to go along with that, like I said, these are making complex ethical decisions, more human-like, and this is what Todd was talking about. Can they make these decisions without emotions? But since these are coming, we will be asking them to do things like this. And then basically how the program would actually work, it'll basically be a series of algorithms. And another situation, say there's a patient at a hospital, and this guy does not want to take his medicine because his religious beliefs tell him not to. The way that a ethical agent will weigh this out is he will say, okay, patient does not want to take medicine. We'll give him a +1 for his religious beliefs. We'll give him another +1 because the medication will not actually harm him if he doesn't take it. Basically, you need it to be greater than 0, your final decision. If the not taking the medication would harm the patient, then it'll be a -1. And since this ends up being a +2, the agent will go ahead and say, okay, that's your choice. It's not going to harm anything. So basically, if the result's greater than 0, it'll allow the human to make the decision, and if not, then either seek more advice from a doctor, or it'll take some other course of action. So that is how we would build them into that. Our conclusion as a group, the technology is coming. It's inescapable. We need to be prepared for it because singularity is approaching, and basically it is our task to plan for the future. And as humans, we need to be the ones to make the steps forward to live cohesively. And I will hand it back over to Wei for his individual conclusion.
Okay, my conclusion is more people start to feel threatened by robots writing intelligence, but thinking about their ethical issues about the moral decisions. However, for the time being, more concern should be addressed on how robots will be used as tools, and hopefully a comprehensive ethical framework will be established before the robots has blended into our life and be in daily use like computers or cell phones.
My conclusion is that humanity has a track record of not using technology very well, and I think we'll continue to do that. So as we're developing our robots, we will have people out there who will deliberately make unethical robots. I think that's bound to happen. I also think that there's definitely going to be a period of time when robots are self-aware, but before they actually merge with us or us with them, if that ever happens. So this will be an issue that we as technologists will definitely be having to deal with.
And then for my conclusion, a lot of discussion was, well, just don't build robots with ethics. And even though that sounds like a really good idea, I don't think that's something that we could ever battle. At some point, somebody's going to take it to the next level. As humans, we see that all the time with technology. We always want to one-up what we've already developed. So at some point, they were going to have ethics. I think that it's something that needs to be kept on a level ground where humans can get along with the robots that we create, and we just kind of see where it kind of goes. As Todd said, there are going to be people who create unethical robots. We would have to come up with some sort of plan in order to keep that from happening, but we abuse technology all the time, so I think it's something that we would have to take very slow and step by step.
Okay, my personal take on the whole situation is that because the technology is for sure coming someday, 20 years, 50 years, whatever from now, as humans, we need to be the ones to be prepared for it because if we don't, people say texting has broken down communication. Well, if we're not treating these ethical agents as humans, how are we going to end up treating each other? I believe that if we are not prepared for it, then eventually our own ethics will be breaking down. So, and that's.
Give him a big round of applause, please. And then questions. Yes, questions. Yes.
Now, I don't want to get all science fiction and Terminator on you, but but in the movies there's the whole doomsday situation, the possible day where it might come that they actually start to take over. Do you see anything like that possibly ever happening?
Yes.
Well, you have a different. To kind of finish it, I don't know if you remembered one of the videos that we watched on how they will eventually become smarter than us, but as humans, we will always remain in control. We will always have like a cut the power, shut off button. So I mean, as long as people are programming them and thinking about it, making sure that we do stay in control and they're not going to basically try to rise above the human population, I don't think it would be an issue. So.
There are some also science fiction saying that the apes will become controlling the world or something like that. So is it the other side of the spectrum or what? These are apes, these are...
I mean, possibly. If the dinosaurs had never been wiped out, they theorized whether humans would have arisen, as an intelligent species. So I don't know. I'm one of those people that I'm normally not a half glass empty person, but when it comes to the survival of our species, I sort of am. I figure we're doomed eventually one way or the other, probably by our own hands. But I think something will replace us, whether it's the robots or something else.
Now, what is an ethical robot, an unethical robot?
I think that that's one of the questions that we have. What is an ethical robot? And you see these different schools of thought of, would an ethical robot be a robot that could harm itself, could harm other robots, but would not harm a human? That would be part of Isaac Asimov's three rules of robotics. Is an ethical robot one that does whatever its creator or master says, no matter what that is? So that's definitely a question, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Any other questions? Okay, so give them a round of applause. And
towards humans. And then Michael will wrap up talking about, can we actually build ethics into robots? So I'll turn the mic over to Wei.
Well, first of all, I will talk about introduce some general things about the ethics of autonomous robots. And a robot is a multifunctional manipulator that's being utilized by human beings, mostly in manufacturing companies. And but with the rising intelligence of robots and a consideration about their ethics issues.
Hello, everyone. We are group number 3. These are my colleagues. Wei is going to talk about our topic, which is ethics and autonomous robots. So he'll be introducing the topic. Chelsea then is going to talk about robots as the receptors of ethical treatment from humans. I'll be talking about robots as ethical producers of.
They will create a tool for us, and based on our personal preference, and it will guess our needs. So someone can use the Google ethically, but some others can use it unethically. So no matter how we use it, the ethical issue is determined by the users rather than Google itself, because Google is innocent. And the other perspective is a radical view that the ethics of the robots is determined by their intrinsic value. Has been their ethical issues has been arose controversially among the forward thinkers, and the ethics of autonomous robots is actually a part of ethics of technology, but different from other technologies. It has two perspectives. The first one is a conservative view that the robots are considered as the tools. And the second one is from the radical view that robots not merely tools, but also have their intrinsic status and philosophically living on this planet like human beings. So from the conservative view, robots are at the same as other technology. Their ethics is determined by those programmer and designers. Whoever create those robots, and the ethical issue here is about the way how people use and create them, such as personal robots. It might be difficult for us to think about our own personal robots, but we can think about the Google. It is actually not a robot, but it is a personal artificial intelligence, because it